Now, one thing that you need to be aware of is that all the passages that we're going to be looking at, some of them may be arguments, but some may not be. And you're going to need to be able to distinguish between an argument and just a simple passage. Now, if a passage contains an argument, it is going to prove something or purport that it proves something. If it doesn't claim to prove something, then it's not an argument. And basically, two conditions must be fulfilled for a passage to purport to prove something. The first thing is, at least one of the statements must claim to present evidence or reasons. The second thing is, there must be a claim that the alleged evidence supports or implies something. Or in other words, a claim that something follows from the evidence or reasons. So you have to have evidence or reasons, and then there has to be a claim that comes or follows from those evidence or reasons. Now, it's not necessary that premises present actual evidence or true reasons, and you'll see this as we go on. And the premise doesn't actually have to support the conclusion. It just is supposed to purport that it does. And you'll see this as we go on, but just be aware that it's not necessary that the premises are actually true or that the premises actually support the conclusion. It just needs to say that it does, okay? We're going to be focusing on inferential claims. And basically an inferential claim is simply the claim that the passage expresses a certain kind of reasoning process, that something supports or implies something, or that something follows from something else. So we're just saying that we're going to be looking at inferential claims, that we have premises, we have conclusions. The premises are saying that they support the conclusion. Now, whether they do or not doesn't necessarily matter, but we'll talk more about that later. Okay, one of the things that you need to realize if you're trying to decide if a passage is claiming evidence or saying that it supports something, look for the indicator words that were talked about in 1.1, even though that sometimes passages may not contain any. But if they contain indicator words, that's a pretty good sign it's an argument. And then look for the presence of inferential relationships. Look for connection points. Look to see if one premise flows to the next premise, if they build upon one another, if the premises flow together with the conclusion. Those are things that will help you understand if you're dealing with a passage or an argument. Okay, and one thing that's really important to note, when you're looking at indicator words, realize that just because you have indicator words, they may not be being used in the logical sense. They may be being used in a temporal sense or some other manner. And let me give you an example of that. So if I say, since Edison invented the phonograph, there have been many technological developments. And I'll say it again. Since Edison invented the phonograph, there have been many technological developments. Now the word since is an indicator word. However, when we're looking at since in this instance, it's being used in a temporal manner. It's mainly talking about from that time. From the time that Edison invented the phonograph, we've had lots of other developments. So that right there, that statement is not an argument. Okay. Now the next one I'm going to read to you is an argument. Since Edison invented the phonograph, he deserves credit for a major technological development. Since Edison invented the phonograph, he deserves credit for a major technological development. In this instance, the word since is being used logically. Okay? It's not being used in a temporal manner or in some other manner. Another way for you to look at it, if you're still being confused about these sentences, is to use the word therefore. If you're trying to figure out, like in this instance, is this use of the word since, is it being used in a temporal manner? Is it being used in a logical manner? Use the word therefore. Insert the word therefore in front of which sentence you think is the conclusion and see if the conclusion follows from the premise. For example, if I said, since Edison invented the phonograph, therefore he deserves credit for a major technological development. Now I know that's a little awkwardly worded, but if I changed around a little bit and I said Edison invented the phonograph, therefore he deserves credit for a major technological development, there I have an argument. Now if I put it back in the first one, if I said since Edison invented the phonograph, therefore there have been many technological developments, that doesn't flow. So use the word therefore. It's very handy. Don't forget it. If you're trying to figure out if a passage contains premises and a conclusion and that the premises purport to support the conclusion, then insert the word therefore in front of the different sentences and see if one of them flows from the others. Okay. Now, we're going to talk about different kinds of non-arguments. Now, with non-arguments, there are several types. You have simple non-inferential passages. You have expository passages. You have illustrations, explanations, conditional statements. Okay. None of those are arguments. None of those are arguments. Okay. And basically, I'm going to talk about briefly each one of those. Okay. Simple non-inferential passages. These basically are passages that lack a claim that anything is being proved. These are just passages we're not trying to prove anything. These are made up of warnings, pieces of advice, statements of belief or opinion, loosely associated statements, reports. So, warnings, pieces of advice, statements of belief or opinion, loosely associated statements, or reports. If you have any of these, none of these are arguments. Okay, they're not claiming that anything is being proved. If I tell you, watch out, don't slip on the ice, all I'm doing is giving you a warning. I'm not trying to argue with you over anything. If I give you a piece of advice, again, I'm not trying to argue with you. I'm just trying to give you a piece of advice. So realize warnings, pieces of advice, statements of belief or opinion, loosely associated statements or reports, those are not arguments. Okay. The next thing that is not an argument is an expository passage. Okay, an expository passage basically has a topic sentence, and then it's followed by one or more sentences that basically develop the topic sentence. So you have an expository passage, begins with a topic sentence, and it has one or more sentences that develop that topic sentence. So you might be talking about solid, liquid, and gas, and then I go on and I explain what a solid is, what a liquid is, what a gas is. That's just an expository passage. I'm not trying to claim anything. Okay. If you're confused between what's an expository passage and an argument in borderline cases, ask yourself a couple of things. Ask yourself whether the topic sentence makes a claim that everyone accepts or agrees upon. If the topic sentence is talking about something that everyone accepts or agrees upon, it is not an argument. We rarely talk about things. We don't have arguments. We don't make arguments over things that already have been proven to be true. For example, if I was talking about this is a cup, see, look there, this is a cup, and then I'm going to say this is a cup. It's red on the outside, it has a handle, and it's white on the inside. I've just given you an expository passage. I'm not arguing with you over whether this is a cup or not, because everybody knows that this is a cup. This is not a spaceship. It's not a planet. It's not a table. It's a cup. So that's one thing to ask yourself. Is the topic sentence talking about something that's widely accepted? If it is, then more than likely it's just an expository passage. Okay. Now, if the topic sentence makes a claim that many people don't know or have never heard of before, then it's probably going to be an argument. Okay, it's probably going to be an argument. Next, moving on to illustrations. An illustration is an expression that's just giving you one or more examples that are intending to show you what something means or how something is done. So an illustration gives you one or more examples that are intended to show you what something means or how something is done. Illustrations are often confused with arguments because illustrations contain a lot of indicator words. So don't let that throw you off, okay? But they just try to give you an example of how what something means or how something is done. This happens a lot in science. If you see a lot of science passages, not always, but a lot of times they're going to be illustrations. Like, for example, chemical elements as well as compounds can be represented by molecular formulas. Thus, oxygen is represented by O2, water by H2O, and sodium chloride by NaCl. So, I'm just trying to show you how they're represented. That's all. I'm not trying to argue with you whether these are the real representations or not, because these are the accepted ones. Okay? Let's see. In trying to decide whether an illustration should be interpreted as an argument, you need to ask yourself whether it purports to prove something. So if you're confused about is it an illustration or is it an argument, does it purport to prove something? And an illustration does not claim to prove anything. Okay, it's just giving you an example or showing you what something means. It's not claiming something. So be aware of that. Okay, an explanation. An explanation is an expression that sheds light on some event or phenomenon. And usually this phenomenon is usually accepted as a matter of fact, okay? So the sky appears blue from the Earth's surface because light rays from the sun are scattered by particles in the atmosphere. Okay, that's an explanation. And let me just show you this, because I know this video is running long. It's going to happen the further we go on. Let me get this in there, raised up. Okay, so at the top we have an argument that has premises and conclusion. There's claimed evidence and something follows from the evidence. Another way to look at it, you have premises, which are accepted facts, and then you have a conclusion, which is claimed to be proved by those accepted facts. In an explanation, you have explanans, which claim to shed light on something, and you have the explanatum, which is the accepted fact. So that's the difference between an argument and explanation. An argument, there are accepted facts that claim to prove something. But in an explanation, it's just shedding light upon an already accepted fact. So hopefully you can see the difference. With an explanation, it's just shedding light on something that's already been accepted as a fact. In an argument, you're still trying to prove something. So hopefully that will help you see the difference between those two. Okay, the last one is a conditional statement. And conditional statements are if-then. So if professional football games incite violence in the home, then the widespread approval given to the sport should be reconsidered. That's an if-then statement. Okay. The component statement immediately following the if is the antecedent. So what follows the if is the antecedent, and then what follows the then is the consequent. Okay, so what follows the if is the antecedent, what follows the then is the consequent. You need to remember that because it'll come up later on. Okay, what you need to know about this. Okay, conditional statements. Here's how you know if a conditional statement is an argument or if it is not. Okay, the first thing, a single conditional statement is not an argument. A single conditional statement is not an argument. Okay, a single conditional statement is not an argument. So the first one I just said, if professional football games incite violence in the home, then the widespread approval given to the sport should be reconsidered. That's an if-then statement, and it's one conditional statement, so it's not an argument. Now, number two, a conditional statement can serve as a premise or the conclusion of an argument. It can serve as a premise or conclusion of an argument. The third thing is the inferential content of a conditional statement may be re-expressed to form an argument. Okay, and in your textbook, they give you examples of how they take if-then statements, which are not arguments, and then they reword them and they make them into arguments. So you might want to read back over that section if you're confused about that. But basically, if you have a single conditional statement, you don't have an argument because one statement can't make an argument. Okay. The second thing is a conditional statement might be a premise or it might be a conclusion in an argument. So a conditional statement may be part of an argument. Okay. But just realize a conditional statement is one statement, but you got to have other ones to go with it to make it an argument. And the third thing is you can reword a conditional statement and make it into an argument. So that concludes this very long video, and I'm so sorry. I'll try to keep them short. So see you next time.